The ancient Egyptians were highly content with their daily lives, to the point that they believed their afterlife would be a continuation of life on earth. Ancient Egyptian life was focused on enjoying each day and making it unforgettable. And through their observance of the harmony and the balance of the universe, they were encouraged to live in peace and happiness with themselves and others. The Pythagoreans, who were greatly impressed by the location of harmony in the universe, were thus encouraged to ultimately live in peace and contentment with themselves and others. The number of Egyptians was categorized by social class. The upper class occupied the top of the pyramid, and the royal dynasty at the top enjoyed great respect, wealth, and luxury. Second to the top is the educated professional class like the doctors, the accountants, priests, and scribes that were believed that they were chosen by the god Thoth. Then comes the working class like the sailors, the craftspeople, and soldiers who played a key role in providing and protecting the life in Egypt. And in the lower class was the servants and the farmers that worked in the lands owned by the king, the elite which produced the goods that helped the entire culture to thrive and were the necessary labor force for the construction of the pyramids and other monuments of Egypt. All of the jobs and position in society was passed down from father to son. It wasn't until the time of ancient Egypt that the idea of family became important. Parents sharply controlled the unions of their children. Girls were usually married around the age of 12, while boys came of age between 15 and 20. The girls usually stayed at home and learned from their mother, while the boys were taught the trades of their fathers and uncles. Additionally, nearly all ancient Egyptian marriages were polygamous, with several wives considered the chief wife, and the one that was higher was viewed as the chief wife. Divorce existed in ancient Akkad, but it was rare and fit for decency in the culture. The relationship with the man was specially the union of the genders at the time. Following investigating men were advised to marry as soon as possible. The structure of the family is very straightforward since wives handle the members and the men's primary responsibility inside the car is to make disruption. Ancient Egyptians created their own houses, temples, and tombs from mud bricks made of sun-dried mud. This building material made quick and inexpensive, but the majority of those bricks were illegible and destroyed and were likely filled with possessions, religious items, and hieroglyphs. The houses were cool inside and had flat roofs, so in the summertime, folks could sleep on them. The majority of the townhouses had 2 stories with a living room on the ground floor and a bedroom on the topmost floor, so the residents could sleep in the living room. Every home was built around a courtyard, and people cooked in the open courtyard. Noblemen lived in larger homes than everybody else, since they had multiple rooms. In ancient Egypt, women were often treated like comparable people to men as many of them were able to possess property, carry on business deals the same as men, and could testify in court. Women enjoyed having the option to occupy high-ranking positions such as supervisors and priestesses, but their focus remained on taking care of the home and their youngsters. Food could be easily found in Egypt because the soil was fertile, the Nile was full of nutrients and water, and many types of crops grew well there, including wheat and barley. Bread served as the primary source of carbohydrates and was prepared with optical axis, herbs, and sesame seeds. They mostly based on grains and vegetables for their food, with fish their primary source of protein because the meat was considerably more expensive and not as readily available. Their diet predominantly consisted of chopping down animals and maintaining the raw meat fresh within the frequent Egyptian weather conditions. The beer was also the main drink of life in ancient Egypt and was consumed at every meal. Wine also was found at the tables of the wealthy noblemen. In ancient Egypt, the Nile personified life and was regarded as the primary source of human transpiration. The Nile provided a fertile region for Egypt to cultivate all that they needed into water for irrigation, wheat, barley, grasses used to produce paper, ropes, and baskets, etc. The Nile also played an important function as a religious entity as it was seen as a transmission from the gods such as the ancient Egyptian god Sobek who inspired the creation of the Nile. You may cruise onto Egypt's Nile River on Egypt Nile cruises to witness the most famed attractions in the land. The ancient Egyptians tried to live their life to the fullest as they engaged in everything from hunting crocodiles and hippopotamuses, and playing board games like Senet and Hound and Jackals. They even had toys for children in the shapes of animals. There were also a lot of sports that included athletics, the early versions of teams like swimming, hockey, handball, wrestling, rowing, archery, gymnastics, and many water sports like water juster, which was a form of sea battle played in small boats on the Nile River. The noblemen and the wealthy would throw extravagant parties filled with the finest foods and beverages. Music and dancing also were found very common in ancient Egyptian culture and were considered to be art forms. Each kind of a festival in ancient Egypt had different effects based on the theme. Each kind of festival in the religious festivals were held in conjunction with the lunar calendar in temples like the Festival of the Valley in the honor of the god Amun, the Feast of Hathor at Dendra, the Festival of the goddess Isis at Busiris, and the celebration of Batet at Busastis. There was also another kind of festivals like individual birthdays, the anniversaries of great deeds of the king, funerals, and house-wearing events. There were also of other festivals that had a unique religious nature like the Weepatrenpet, which marked the beginning of the year in July at the annual Nile flooding. The Sea Festival was held in the third reign of the pharaoh's reign to celebrate his kingship, and the Festival of Khoiak, which honored Osiris' death and revival. The Egyptian would indulge themselves in every kind of excess in these festivals despite the fact that self-indulgence wasn't appropriate at every gathering. You can read more also about the festivals and public holidays in Egypt during these days. The ancient Egyptians wore clothing made out of linen, a lightweight fabric woven from cotton. Both women and men wore the same fabric in the form of linen kilts. Most women dressed in plain sleeved dresses. Servants and lower-class women are often shown wearing a kilt, while the royal and the noble women are shown wearing fitted dresses from the shoulder to the ankles, and the noblemen are seen in skirts and blouses. A large amount of the ancient Egyptian children didn't begin wearing clothes until they were about 10 years old. With everybody remaining barefoot, the children wanted to look like the gods who didn't require shoes. But when someone was on a long journey or a place where they would hurt or injure their feet, they would wear sandals. But many of the lower class used shoes made from woven rushes, while noble women wore high leather, or painted, shoes, and similarly, children did not like kohl makeup since it helped stop the sun from hurting the people. The ancient Egyptians, like the lower class, wore jewelry like rings, pierced ears, necklaces, and amulets, while the higher and wealthier class wore jewelry made of gold, silver, and electrum for both fashion and religious purposes. They also were very civilized as they took extra care of their hygiene. They would cleanse themselves in the river or a bath at home. They didn't have soap, but they used a cleansing cream made of oil, lime, and perfume instead. Egyptian society was a fairly law-abiding community. Egyptian law was speedy for those who were apprehended of breaking it. Justice and judgment were the obligation of the battalion chief, the pharaoh's right hand and second in command. The local court or kenbet was comprised of natives who had the authority to hear the case and decided who was guilty and who was innocent. Ancient Egypt era had a religious significance as all the Egyptians celebrated the birthday of the gods. The court could be even held in the marketplace or on the street, and there was also an administrative building called the Judgment Hall which existed in any city. In the New Kingdom, there were no lawyers or appeals. The priests of Amun were the ones who decided the verdict, as the people trusted them to give a just hearing and to make the right judgment. Crimes such as rape, assault, murder, and patricide were punished by various degrees of mutilation, imprisonment, forced labor, or death. All the offenders were used each day in Karnak to carry out hard physical labor at such places as Thebes. The ancient Egyptian medical condition was heavily affected by the religious atmosphere. They used a combination of scientific techniques like observation and diagnosis and magical rituals such as spells and charms. All of Egypt's doctors began their training as scribes as they needed to read medical texts to figure out the right cures. Most diseases were thought to inflicted by the gods as a form of a punishment for committing a certain sin, and that's why they had to know which supernatural presence was responsible. In order to do their job, they had to read a lot of religious literature works on surgery, the setting of broken bones, dentistry, and the treatment of various illnesses. The ancient Egyptian gained a great deal of knowledge in the field of anatomy due to the practice of removing the human organs and understanding the afflictions and the remedies of the human body. They cared deeply about their dental hygiene as they developed the toothpaste made of eggshells, ox hooves, and ashes, and the toothbrush to keep their teeth healthy and clean of sand and grit. They also invented breath mints to cover their bad morning aroma. The ancient Egyptian mythology had thousands of deities over the years. Their religion was polytheistic as every town and village had its own god or goddess. Every deity or religion had its own temple, rituals, ceremonies, and other special practices that had a powerful influence on their life. They believed in life after death as the body was preserved in a lifelike form through the mummification process. They confused magic with science and believed it's only in the power of gods to create or destroy. They had many myths that explained the way the world and beyond, like the creation of the universe, and the afterlife. Most of our information comes from the Book of the Dead, as it was written throughout Egypt's history and contained text, hymns, formulas, incantations, and magical words to help the dead arrive safely to the underworld to be judged and explain the origin of the gods. The ancient Egyptians were natural-born explorers and inventors. They were the first to create a writing system in the form of hieroglyphics, which was drawing portraying a story. They used it to keep accurate records of their lives, discoveries, and religious dogma. They also developed a sheet on paper called papyrus, which they personally created, and black ink, which they used in writing and painting. It also came in various colors. The ancient Egyptians used the knowledge of astronomy to develop the lunar calendar based on the cycles of the moon and the star Sirius, which we still use to track the days until today. They were the first people to divide days into equal parts: 12 months, 356 days, 24 hours units through timekeeping devices like obelisks, shadow clocks, water clocks, and sundials. The position of the sun determined the passing of the days, and the passing of the night was determined by the rise and fall of the stars. Their observation of the sun, the night sky, and the stars affected their religion and way of life. The ancient Egyptians had a talent for geometry and math, as they used it accurately to build pyramids, temples, and other buildings, as well as for record-keeping and business transactions. They also created the ox-drawn plow and an irrigation system using hydraulic engineering principles in order to improve their agriculture. They also worked on developing the best ships through their knowledge of aerodynamics. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for more.